Today's webinar is about how to be equity-driven in leadership. And my name's James, and I'm the course advisor for the Leadership for Development Masters Programme that is jointly held by the University of Manchester and the University of Melbourne. So if you are interested in that course, I'll be your first point of contact. You can ask me any questions about the application process, the course content, fees, funding, all these kinds of things. So feel free to get in touch with me. You'll see my email address on the presentation at the bottom there. It's studyonline@manchester.ac.uk. So you can use that address to contact me with any questions that you have about our Master for Leadership for Development. I'm joined by two of the academics on that programme. We have Dr Jaco Renken, who is the co-director of the Master's Programme, and he'll be talking to you a little bit today about the programme and about some of the funding options that we offer from the University of Melbourne and Manchester. And I'm also joined by Dr Violeta Schubert, who's also a co-director for the programme and is a lecturer in Melbourne. And so I'll just give you both a chance to introduce yourself a little bit and share with us a bit about your background and your research to the audience today. So Jaco, would you like to begin?
Yeah, thanks, James, and hello to everyone. Morning if you're on that side of the sun, and good afternoon or evening if you're on the other side of the sun. So as James said, I am a senior academic at the Global Development Institute in Manchester, and has had the privilege to be part of getting the Master of Leadership for Development off the ground. It's been a vision intangible until a vision tangible, and it's great to at this stage, almost 2 years into the running of our program, together with our colleagues in Melbourne, to have an ongoing program of these kind of events where we start talking a little bit about contemporary issues around development and leadership and the intersection of those. My own background is for a long time being in the academic world, particularly focusing on the intersection of digital technologies, leadership, and development. And I've worked for many years in public sector in South Africa, and then for a couple of years in Botswana, and it's been for the last 11 years in the UK, associated with the University of Manchester, having the privilege to carry out my research and teaching work in this area that I'm very passionate about. And that's a little bit about me.
That's great. Thank you, Jaco. And Violeta, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. So lovely to be here. I hope we get a chance to have chats and interactions and not just us talking. I am a development studies academic at Melbourne. And of course, I am the director from the Melbourne side for our joint degree. Same with Jaco. We began on this journey. It's taken us quite a long time because we wanted to get it right. And it's sort of a collaborative leadership, co-design leadership experience. Research-wise, I am an anthropologist. Most of my work has been looking at the Balkans, gender. I've got quite a number of projects on aging, kinship and community elder care. I have worked with various NGOs, contributed to UN agencies, and to task force in the past. Mostly, I guess you could say that I'm interested in the way that development has to situate itself relative to, the changing world. And I think that our attention in development has to expand, and we have to rethink and maybe place issues of equity and leadership together. We haven't had a chance to do that at all. Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. Yeah, so we are now going to move on to the next section of our webinar. So I'll just quickly explain what we're going to talk to you about today. We're going to start by talking about the role of equity with women and e-leadership, and that will then be followed by a discussion on the equity fee remission that University of Manchester and Melbourne offer for the Master of Leadership for Development programme, and we'll introduce you a little bit more about that course. We'll also have opportunities for Q&As throughout the webinar as well. So if we'd like to begin with Dr. Schubert about your work on women and e-leadership.
So this is part of a larger project, and this project has been for the past 3-4 years concerned with the women's leadership in collaboration with a colleague at Erlanger University in Indonesia, East Java. We have been working on different aspects of communal, social, and political leadership of women. We had a project that was looking at, well, what happens to women in terms of leadership after they finish studying in international universities such as Melbourne, for example. But what I wanted to have a talk about together today was thinking more along the lines of, especially post-COVID, but well before that, we were starting to talk about e-leadership generally when it comes to leadership. In development studies, we haven't been talking e-leadership very well. The COVID experience taught us that remote leadership, remote work is important. And, in conjunction, we've been talking a lot about equity in terms of, ICT for development, which is my colleague Jaco's specialty. But there seemed to me and to my collaborator a real need to be looking at, well, if we have issues of equity with leadership generally, and by some estimates, it'll take us several hundred years before we get proper gender equity in much less leadership. But leadership is changing. And it's not only that, one, development studies hasn't paid that much attention to leadership. Two, women's leadership is presumed often in development to require building, like it's non-existent and it has to be built up. So we don't actually spend a lot of time on actual leaders in community and in different places. And so growing attention to issue of gender, for example, in public administration, advances in gender equity in public administrative practices, public leadership of women. We separate it. We say, the leadership in the governance aspect, public administration being one aspect, or political leadership. So we see them separately. Are they so different? Is the underpinning thing when we're concerned about women and leadership, whether it's in the governance, public administration, or political leadership, or some other, or in the business private sector, is there something that is fundamentally running through that concern with inequity, or is it something else? Should we be looking at inequity in terms of women's leadership, or should we go a bit deeper? And what we found in our research in various layers through the years is that there's some incredibly sophisticated leadership happening across the so-called developing world by both men and women, and incredible leadership in the LGBTQI space as well, that we don't even talk about the gender and leadership perspective. But we know very little about how that might look similar or differently to most of the writings on leadership and most of the identified or perceived problems that we have about equity. Development is all about equity. I hope it's all about equity. It's that opportunity to rethink not simply how we do things, but that distributive element that we all get a share in the process of development, and leadership is the same. So if we think in terms of, there's governance, public administrative, as well as political leadership. We know that in the political leadership space, from development perspective, we've been talking about quotas, filling a certain percentage of spaces for women to be political representatives. And there's all kinds of debates around that. The fact that, in the public administration or in the governance perspective, there is a strong trend where women's contributions at the local mayor level are much higher than the national level. So women seem to be located in the leadership space a lot closer to community for various reasons. And it sort of fits with, reinforces a few stereotypes. And there have been some very strong messaging around, women's leadership. It's not just about access to leadership, yeah? Women, equity, we won't achieve women's equity without women being able to access opportunities to, for leadership as well as other aspects. But the other perspective from that is that it's about, is women's leadership distinctive? I mean, is there such a thing as a different, not just a cultural distinctiveness, but a gendered way of looking at leadership? Is leadership inherently gendered? Or is it some kind of, neutral, rational, scientific thing that anyone can do the right thing and, and do it well in terms of being inclusive and, work towards a good relationality and leading and following in the right way, and you don't have to worry about gender? Or do we? Is leadership something that's gender neutral, or is it inherently gendered? And that's a question which I'd love to hear your thoughts on. I know quite a number of my students in this program for the past 2 years, some are vehemently saying that no, leadership is leadership. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or woman. And others say, oh, of course it matters. Fundamentally, the kind of qualities of leadership that are emphasized are often very masculine, or the sort of bravery, going forth and, not just managing, and almost like a battlefield kind of discussion, descriptor. The other aspect, so the distinctiveness, one is about, equity being about access to. And the other aspect of equity, is thinking, well, how do we appreciate the difference? That's the distinctiveness thing. So, in being given access and having access to, for example, leadership, do women and men do women do it differently? And if they do it differently, it doesn't matter. Or, we know that there's been so many debates. There's so much research on, the struggles that women leaders have found where they endeavor to emulate the, what are predominantly masculine space of leadership, and sort of being more masculine than men, or, in terms of, the certain qualities and approaches to leadership. So we know that that is also a struggle. But is there such a thing as a distinctiveness, a uniqueness, a difference to women's leadership? And should we, for whatever reason, be celebrating that, yeah, and working with it, rather than trying to sort of have a gender neutral perspective on leadership? And the third component in terms of equity that I wanted to share with you all is that thing of the efficacy. A lot of literature sort of points to maybe, being included, having access to something, even being acknowledged for being different. Well, does that actually lead to better leadership? Does it lead to greater satisfaction for both people in a leading role and a following role? Does the broader community benefit by this process. And the issues of efficacy have been challenged by some, they are championed by others. So to give you an idea, if we think that the greater increase of representation of women, because women are distinctive in their approach or their attitudes or their styles or their values and what they uphold, how they go about doing things, because they're likely to be distinctive. And for quite a number of people, academics and commentators, they're distinctive in that they're more oriented to collaboration, to community focus, to being inclusive, and so forth. So quite a number of people think from that perspective. If women's leadership is distinctive, yeah, well, does that produce greater things? Is there a greater value add? Yeah. And the discourse of leadership and equity often feels a bit funny because we've been focusing so much on access. We might even be delving into the right to access based on this distinctiveness. Yeah. But still, from various perspectives, we haven't actually, it's a little bit ethically, morally sort of, there's a tension there. I mean, do we then assess the efficacy of women's leadership because they are individual human being with incredible, smarts and experience and commitment and passion? Or is there a value add specifically by being women because women add something special, something different? Yeah. And what we found in quite talking with different women and paying particular attention to the smart city paradigm, the e-governance smart city paradigms, is that in Surabaya, as well as another local mayor, that the uptake of women mayors of smart city paradigm and e-governance is very high in Indonesia. And there is, certain people who feel that this sort of greater presence or engagement with e-governance it's not necessarily e-leadership yet, but there is a massively enthusiasm by women mayors in taking up e-governance and opening up communications to community and making more information available. But what we also noticed, and contrary to sort of all the uptake, incredible uptake, and for example, the mayor of Surabaya has a world's mayor vote in 2014, winning, and so we're talking international global recognition for these spaces, and the sustainability and environment programs and cleaning up the city, and enormous amount of attention on building e-governance, which is a form of e-leadership, yeah, in itself. But the greatest aspect or asset attributed as the distinctiveness of this, the mayor of Surabaya, Tri Risma, is the fact that she has greater contact with community. So the distinctiveness discourse actually plays out amongst people in the society as well. It's not just academics who highlight the distinctiveness. The distinctiveness for many of the people that we spoke to is the fact that she goes to community. There's pictures of her cleaning the streets and picking up rubbish. Yeah. So the virtual community making, as well as the actual community contact, and the referencing of leadership styles and what women leaders are criticized for, as well as what they're championed for, being closer to community. And, it may be a bit controversial from different cultural contexts, especially in the West, but that notion of caring, nurturing, mothering keeps coming up as, you know, a perceived sort of higher level of trust of women's leadership based around that. So in this recreating via the e-governance, e-leadership spacing, okay, that identity of women leaders around wanting to share with community was a really vital aspect to the approach to leadership. And it leads us to consider, you know, do women leaders do e-leadership differently? Do they, you know, and in different cultural contexts? And the e-leadership of women in governance, local government, as political leaders, or you know, in public administration, would they be different in other contexts? Yeah. What I feel that, and it's worthy of us in terms of development studies has been concerned with equity and justice, rightly so. It should be, you know, we should be, but the equity element is not just access. And the discourse of distinctiveness is integral, but we're not very, to equity, but we're not very good in delving into difference. A lot of the programs, whether it's leadership training, understanding leadership approaches, or development more broadly, we tend to somehow homogenize or make packages that can be transported from one place to the other. So we're not very good in actually highlighting distinctiveness. We try to actually highlight the similarities a lot more than the distinctiveness. Yeah. It also can get into all sorts of debates around, if you do the distinctiveness too much in the wrong hands, it could somehow be used to belittle, not be equitable in the end. So I think that discussions around equity and by looking at women's space in the e-governance and e-leadership, it gave us an opportunity to really think what we mean by that notion of equity. If we want gender equity in development, I hope we do, in society, and if we have concerns about, generally we know that there are inequity issues around leadership as well, for, you know, not just gender perspective, but the inclusiveness of LGBTQI, the inclusiveness of, you know, different cultural, ethnic spaces, especially in multicultural societies at different levels, and how we imagine our worlds via that distinctiveness space rather than, you know, what's same. And in terms of the nitty-gritties, what training in women in e-leadership, I think we can learn a lot from what has already been happening so much across the globe. I think that the old school 20th century idea, you know, the West has the answers and the rest is following, is totally wrong and totally incorrect. And the different ways that we do leadership across different cultures, nonetheless, it does show up that there is a different way of communicating and expressiveness of leadership via the technologies, for good and for bad, we noted with women. I don't want to go overboard because I can go, but I think that's my intro part, and hopefully we can have a conversation about this.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I mean, please feel free to ask any questions based on that. I think that there's some really key topics there that have been introduced. I guess for me, listening to that, I would be interested to hear a little bit about. I know you mentioned that it could be, hundreds of years before we even see this sort of equity, but where do you currently see the progress in this field? And you mentioned some success stories there, but do you see some areas that are progressing well?
I think more local. I think more local leadership is progressing better than global, but there are strong signs in global. The thing is, though, when the gender equity aspect, where we've got some gains, are very visible, but they are very small spaces. It's the leadership, for example, at a global level in the development, the international community, if you like to refer to it, there is more gender balance. A lot of the development organizations are highly conscious about gender equity, but it's sort of organizational spacing, political spacing, social spacing of that women's leadership and the issues of equity keep shifting, and it's quite tokenistic, I think. I don't think we're delving into it properly. I mean, certainly in Australia, enormous amount of discourse of equity, and yet so much data is showing that really that's just rhetoric, in terms of pay gap, in terms of, support for care, women's care arrangements and how that might, or men's, but gender generally, it's not, gender does not mean just women, yeah? Culture.
There's a question come through in the chat here. There's a couple of questions. I'll start with the first question. So if you had to recommend something for us to do, a key activity to change this, where would you start? Where would you recommend we start?
Oh, yeah, I actually, thank you, Natalie. I actually had an activity with my Master of Development Studies students, a sort of simulation preempting our leadership course. But I asked them to be a panel of experts and gave them different identities and roles coming in from different perspectives and to disrupt. I think what we need to do in terms of the equity is we don't look at the different way that equity looks cross-culturally. And to me, that is really important. So a lot of the approaches is, I don't think equity looks the same everywhere. So we need to delve into that. And it sort of goes with Bonga's, if I could read out what Bonga said is, I think equity leadership shouldn't just be about access. Yeah, but it should also be about having a voice as a leader. And that's exactly what I mean, Bonga. There is this thing that, if the same problems that we had in development generally, thinking of, a Western interpretation of empowerment, agency, rights, and so forth, we really need to look more deeply at what equity means. So, for instance, having a voice as a leader, you could put women into a place of formal organizational, institutional leadership, but their ability to be heard. I mean, Australia's small experiment, a very short time of having a female prime minister, and the great, speech that keeps getting downloaded about misogynism. And, there are certain work spaces and institutional structural systems that actually can cut voice, that reduce equity. And we need to look at systems and structures as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for those questions. Please feel free to ask any further questions. We'll move on to the next section of our webinar, but we can always circle back on those topics if people have any questions later on. So next we're on the subject of equity then. The University of Manchester and Melbourne have this Master of Leadership for Development online programme, and this year we have introduced some equity fee remission policy, which sees a 50% fee reduction for applicants from low and middle income countries. So Jaco is going to talk to us a little bit about this course and a little bit about why we're offering this fee remission and how this is promoting equity in the development space. So Jaco, over to you, please.
Yeah, thanks, James. And yeah, Vicky, thank you so much. I mean, there's really a lot of thought-provoking points that you've made over there. A lot of open questions which we don't have any answers for yet, and for which answers would be quite contested if we ever hope to find one answer, and likely there are more, particularly as we distinguish between different cultures and so on. But I think for all our guests today, I wonder if you enjoyed this kind of thing, this kind of academic discourse, a little bit thinking about these ideas around leadership in this instance, but also around our world more globally. Vicky popped in the specific context where these elements have been looked into e-leadership, which is really an emerging and interesting area for myself as well. And the interesting questions around, does e-leadership look the same everywhere, or is e-leadership distinct and bespoke? And how does it differ from the kind of leadership that would be exercised in a in-person kind of a context in an organization or beyond? And these are very interesting things that we are opening up, and that I think if you are into these kind of discussions and debates, but also into resolving some action points for yourself in terms of how do I want to lead within a global world in 2023 and beyond, then I think this Master of Leadership for Development is actually something that would be really an enjoyable and empowering opportunity to create that space for you to engage with these thinking processes and discourses and grow in your own competence and abilities and confidence. So if I, for a short little while, going to talk a little bit about the academic program that we call the Master of Leadership for Development. It's not to deviate from what we've started to discuss, but it's to continue the discussion in the sense that we would like to give you this a little bit of background information to see how learnings and research and discussions and resolutions are fitting into a master's level program that is extending over 24 months, a program that is 100% online. So for this Master of Leadership for Development, one of the strengths of the course for people around the globe, even as we have an audience today from different continents and places, I guess, as I can just deduce from the names of colleagues that are on the call, it doesn't take you out of your place of work, out of your context, but it leaves you free to be able to study from where you are. And in that sense, I think it's already a little bit of an equity step forward, because we know for so many people, if you are in that mid-career stage or you're starting to get traction on your career, to take a break now for a year or 2 years to go and study full-time somewhere in a beautiful place or not so beautiful. Manchester is beautiful, but that's not possible for everyone. Melbourne is also beautiful, mind you. I've been there. It's lovely, even lovelier than Manchester. But the important part here is that it offers us that choice, that freedom to be able to engage with colleagues from around the world at around a program that is cutting across areas of interest and context, which is really great. So in short, this course extends over 24 months, and in a little while I'll show you how that actually plays out, how it looks in practice over those 2-year periods. But typically this is a joint initiative between these two universities where we work together, and you'll see the cadence of how we work together, but it's co-designed, co-developed, co-delivered, co-facilitated between these two rather upfront and leading institutions in different parts of the world. You may ask, but so how much is this going to take time-wise from me? And we would typically recommend 15 hours per week would be a good budget to set aside, acknowledging that it weans and waxes a little bit over time. So certain times of a course or a subject, you will find that you can get by with slightly less attention, but then at other times when there's some assessments or assignments into play, you'll spend a bit more time. And so overall, but that rhythm is pretty much known to our students up front, which means you can actually plan your work and family life and personal life around those kind of things, and have those cadence maybe where you want to use some of your leave time to give you dedicated, focused time to work on assignments, arrange with your workplace if it's necessary for you to do that, in order to accommodate a little bit of a difference in pace at certain times. But our students are making it. None of them are falling by the wayside as a result of it. It takes determination, but we've got loads of experience in that to help our study fellows through. Now, our next enrollment, our next cohort will be entering in August this year. So that's in just not too many months from now, 4 months or so. And 3 months, to be honest, because although classes start actually, or the sessions start that first week in September, we already start a little bit with induction activities at the end of August. And perhaps to latch on to the theme of today is to just have a little moment of reflection on equity in action when it comes to accessing a world-class master's program like this. Now we know the world is by no means an equal place. And as we are thinking around these ideas of equity, one of the realizations that the team working on this course very soon realized is how this lack of access on one hand, but also just simply the equality, even in access to technology and bandwidth, or access to support and access to facilities and resources, and to education, even being allowed to engage in kind of programs like this that is beyond the control of a particular context, is really something that begins to make the world a slightly more level playing field. And in that sense, we've made a very bold decision after long deliberations that we would like to prioritize access to this course a little bit as much as we can, based on the different levels of ability and availability and resourcing around the world. And we then got this equity fee remission initiative off the ground, and I'm so happy and proud that this is a leading, groundbreaking initiative for universities that play in the kind of league that we are playing, to be able to say we are giving everybody that can demonstrate citizenship of a developing country 50% discount on the fees that we are asking to teach this program. So if you are connecting today from a developing country, you should already look at the divide by 2 sign on your mental calculator whenever you see anything around fees, because you will then be able to qualify for that. And James will say a little bit more about a particular breakdown of that, and also some other accessible ways for people that are not studying or connecting from developing countries, particularly because we also want to make the course as accessible for you as possible. James, I know you've given me control over this. Can I ask that we are just moving to the next slide? Yeah, thank you very much. So I want to just briefly point to 4 elements of the course itself, of the program. Firstly, that it will provide you the opportunity to analyze quite critically a lot of the questions that Vicky asked. You could sense there's a critical consideration of this, not just going in one direction, what is right and wrong, but trying to say, so what are the other potential perspectives on something, in order to help us to eventually arrive at well-reasoned positions and so on. And particularly around institutional structures and power relationships that are often making life really, really difficult for ordinary people around the world. And it's the task in the remit of leaders to try and confront these things and navigate in these complexities. And you will definitely get a good dose of that. Another key aspect of this is recognizing that development does not take place in isolation. And so networking with other development professionals around the world is really a key outcome. And we already see some lifelong friendships and work relationships developing in our current cohorts. So it would be really something if that's what you are looking for as well. Next, there is a really important differentiating point about this course, and that is we understand leadership is not philosophical. It is actually very, very practical. And in that sense, the course does not just talk about leadership, but it helps us to practically develop leadership competencies using real life scenarios and case studies, so that it is something that gives you a skill set, a competency set, and a knowledge framework that can be taken on into the real world in helping you to play a leading, increasingly more important leading role in your own work context. And finally, and perhaps this can even could have been the first point, is the ability to acquire critical reasoning and analytical expertise in order to make sense of complex development situations. So in one slide, perhaps, I hope you can perhaps begin to see that what makes this master's course kind of distinctive is that it really brings these two elements of leadership and development together in a really meaningful kind of way, with the ambition to equip everybody that participates with the skill set to be able to lead the work of development so much better. Next slide, James, if you can help me with that, please. Briefly, I want to just chat to you guys, talk you through the course structure. So if you may ask, so what am I going to learn? How is this going to work? And you can read this slide perhaps from left to right, where there's the different subjects or course units that's been indicated over there. But you can see in one way that the course is building from a foundation of the first subject taught by Manchester. So there's a bit of a color code for you over here, contemporary development, where we really delve into the development issues. And the hope is that after that, you'll understand global development in its contemporary manifestation somewhat better. And then a foundational element on leadership, so contemporary leadership, where the same we would hope that you would gain from those discussions and investigations. Then we bring these two together in our core subject, leading development, where we really engage with the distinctiveness. And then, of course, leadership in the development sector do not take place as an individual or just at the political level or elsewhere. It most often takes place in the organizational context. And therefore, we have a next subject focusing on the organizational development and change, where a leader will discharge their tasks mostly. But we do work in a broader world between different organizations and sectors, and therefore our fifth subject is international management and leadership, which particularly look at taking the organization and formulating a strategy of working in a globalized world with other organizations and development sector stakeholders. Our sixth subject is what we'd like to think of as synthesis experience, where all the previous 5 different areas are coming together in a semi-simulation subject, where we work in groups and individually, and you get different scenarios where you're going to apply the skills and competencies that's been built and developed over the previous 5 subjects. And then the course is capstoned by a research component that actually makes up a third of the credit-bearing value of the course, which is something that you will have a choice of either studying it individually, so a deep dive research dissertation project, or in a small group, do a research project together as a group. Of course, this is supervised, and as you can see, this is where Manchester and Melbourne really take hands working together very, very closely to usher you through that last third of the program towards the end. And that's 2 years down the line. There's an indication of the different start dates for our teaching the terms or blocks. 4 of them a year, more or less spread out equally. And that gives you hopefully an overview of the structure and timeline. Last slide from my side, please, James. Thank you very much. I would just like to, for a moment, reflect on what will this course actually benefit your career. And you're welcome to peruse some of those points over there. But at the very moment, I'm connecting to you from South Africa, where I've been here for a week, engaging in some research work. And one of the things that are emerging in conversations almost all the time at regular intervals is this idea that we have very skilled technical people and we have very clever people. But what we really need is for those clever, skilled technical people to be able to take others along with them. And that is the leadership, planning and strategy type of competencies and skills. No wonder that in 2020, the DevEx Talent Outlook report, which is a survey across the whole world with thousands of participants and organizations, came out head and shoulders above any other of the most difficult skills to find. The most in-demand skills that organizations are looking for are these skills: leadership and planning and strategy and coaching. And these are the very, very things that our course focus on. So from that perspective, we believe that this is going to be really equipping and empowering for a career, alongside all the other leadership and development focused elements that we see as part of the course. Now I'm going to draw a line over there and rather leave some time for us to have questions and discussions. James, I've seen that the chat has been buzzing for a while. Can you take us through that? And between myself and Vicky, we can respond to any questions or comments.
Yeah, there has been a lot of questions coming through. Some about the course, about course fees, which I have addressed in the chat box. But yeah, there is a little bit more information about that, and I'll share with you in a minute. Just to go back to the original topic of equity that Violeta was talking about, we did have one more question, which I know has been answered via text. But if Violeta, would you like to share your answer to the rest of the audience?
It was a very nice question in terms of, well, why is there such a thing, orientation of women around community level leadership? And my response generally is that there's been a lot of discussion around, especially by scholars in the US looking at issues of and Europe, that being a local mayor is much easier. It's low-hanging fruit compared to being, the president of a country. So, for some, it's low-hanging fruit. There's, less sort of chance of failure. For others, it fits. There seems to be a greater fit between women, wanting to do local leadership. And actually that being an aspirational point, and it fits comfortably with ideas. A lot of people writing about women making communitarian. They value community and collaboration more. So I can't give you an exact answer. As we've been talking about, there's always some element. And I think the nice way to sum up, what Jaco and I have been sharing with you guys, is that it's not about having some kind of definitive, hard sell, this is the answer, this is what works. You have experience, you're smart people. You wouldn't be interested in masters, without being smart people, without having the right kind of experience to explore these things. It's that opportunity to delve more deeply, to expand, enhance, and build new skills and new knowledges. But you have to go outside of your comfort zone. It's not a how-to, yeah? Although we have some suggestions about what seems to work better than other ways.
Excellent, thank you for that. Yeah, there has been a lot of questions about fees. payments and installments, things like that. So I'll just quickly build on what Jaco was saying about the fee remission. So we offer a 50% fee remission for applicants from low and middle income countries. You can check to see if your country is on that list by visiting the World Bank website. There is a link in the presentation. There's also a link on the course webpage for you to check that. If you don't qualify for this fee remission, you can also apply for our Sustainable Development Goals Scholarship. So this is available to everybody to apply for. And if you're successful for this, you will receive a third off your tuition fees. There's a little bit of an application process for this. You have to put together a bit of a case and presentation for your for this scholarship. So there's more information on the website about that. So if you don't qualify for that initial scholarship, do look into that, because that is a really good opportunity to get a third off your tuition fees. There are also a few other discounts that we offer. So if you have studied at the University of Melbourne or Manchester previously, you will automatically qualify for a 15% fee discount. And also we offer an early application discount. So if you apply before June 26th, that's just your application. You don't have to receive an offer before that date. You submit your application before that date, you'll also automatically qualify for a 10% fee discount. It's only a one discount per applicant policy, so just bear that in mind. There are also lots of other funding options available depending on what country you're based in. For our UK-based students, you can apply for a master's loan as well, and there's also similar funding options for those based in Australia. But if you have any questions about funding, please get in contact with me. We also offer an instalment plan, so you pay your fees in 3 installments per year. So over the 2 years of study, you'll pay in 6 equal installments, with first payment due when you register at the end of August, and then the second payment in February, the third payment in May, and it carries on like that in your second year. It's free to apply as well, so you don't have to pay to apply. We can also offer language tests for free as well if that's a requirement. So it's a very accessible course in terms of the initial payment structure. So we hope that we've offered a lot of options for people of different backgrounds that really promote this message of equity and leadership that we've talked about today. I think there has been another question about, is the course available full-time? But yeah, this course is only available part-time as an online master's. So that's the current option at the moment. So if you have any questions about that that part-time online program, you can contact me. My email address is studyonline@manchester.ac.uk. And I'd love to hear from you. Love to see your interest in the course. I'd be happy to talk to you further. We can arrange another Zoom consultation or phone call to discuss the course further. So just feel free to get in touch, and I'll be able to follow up with you there. I think I've covered.
Also, most welcome to contact us. We quite often have conversations with people.
Absolutely, yeah, that would be great as well. A bit more of an in-depth academic conversation with our teaching team as well would be a real benefit to everyone. And I know that our academic team love to hear your questions and discuss these topics with you. I think we're pretty much there in terms of time. So just feel free to contact me. And thank you for attending today. Thank you to our panelists as well, Jaco and Violeta. And we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you, Vicky, again. But most of all, thank you very much to everyone that took some time.
And such wonderful comments,
Amazing. We haven't responded to all. Yes, we cover the SDGs. Yes, you're welcome to contact us. Just ask James for email addresses. We're happy to set up a call. And we hope to hear more from you at future sessions, and also to welcome you onto the new intake, late August, beginning September. Over from my side.
See you guys.
Thanks very much. Bye for now.
Bye.